It's always a fun adventure to have together, and we're looking forward to this. So welcome. Again, just to note that this is a draft starting point budget. It captures the draft level of service enhancement that Council was interested in exploring, as identified through various strategic visioning exercises. Through the discussions that Council will have thereafter, or hereafter, Council will ultimately find a budget and level of service that they feel is appropriate for 2023. And we look forward to those discussions and assisting Council with that, through that process. So just a quick overview of the day. Obviously, we're going to start with the presentation of the draft budget, the capital, followed by the operating. We think that'll probably take us to close to around lunch. So that's where we anticipate having kind of our lunch break. And then following that is when we've identified some kind of key strategic budget items that we'll want some more discussion and direction on from Council with regards to things that are in the budget. And I'll speak more to those when we get to that item 3, and I'll kind of give an overview of that when we get there. Following that will be a Council roundtable where we'll go around and give Council the opportunity to identify any other areas that they think we've missed in the budget that they'd like Council to consider for the budget. And then after that, there's just a few outstanding kind of strategic issues that we have a recommendation for, and then we adjourn. And then just a quick note about the numbers on the agenda sheet here. The numbers in green are the numbers that we've put into the draft budget based on kind of strategic visioning items that have come out of different sessions with Council. And then any that are in red are ones that aren't currently in this draft of the budget. So that's how to understand those numbers there. And some of them are capturing, some of those numbers are capturing those kind of priorities that were identified through those visioning sessions, and some of them are simply numbers what Council did last year. And so we'll explain that as we get to each item. So with that, Mayor, we happily turn it to you to guide this process today.
We are going to have a morning break. So do you have that planned somewhere?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. we were thinking probably around 10:30, halfway through the morning. So around that time where we're at, we'll find an opportunity that'll be a natural pause.
And I'm not trying to just worry about breaks. I just, because going right to noon might be heavy. So we'll keep that on our thoughts. But all right. So I should also mention there is opportunity to make motions today, but they certainly would be relative to what we'd like to see back on the 13th. If there's something that we all agree should be there, not all, majority agree. I think we could start going to unanimous, but I don't think that would work. So we have item 2 is a presentation of the capital budget. Is first. Amanda's got a fancy contraption up there to put her computer on.
Last time I touched this, I killed my computer. So let me try this computer.
Just happened this morning, her computer died.
Yeah. So bear with me.
What a day to have that.
Is that an omen?
No. What we can see.
Okay.
But she's wearing nice new shoes, so.
Don't look at my shoes. They're not shined. Okay. Well, good morning, Mayor and Council, and welcome to the 2023 Capital and Operating Budget presentation.
It just made me think that anybody watching on live stream can access this presentation on our website if they want to follow along. So Amanda Riley, our Assistant CEO and Chief Financial Officer, is up here with us, and the the package that's presented this morning will be available for people to follow, since they can't follow our screens.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that's true. The budget, if for those watching at home, the budget document and the budget slide deck for today's meeting is online at didsbury.ca/budget. So, as you can see, this is our agenda for today. We'll be starting with the capital budget, and then moving on to the operating budget, the tax supported side, and then discussing the utility departments. We'll do a brief discussion about property taxes and what we know so far about assessment. And then after lunch, we'll get into the strategic budget items. So as the mayor said, feel free to ask questions during the presentation if you need me or the other presenters to clarify what we're discussing. So this slide, the overview slide, it's kind of the story of the budget so far. So if you don't listen to anything else today or read anything else, listen to this, because it's a really high level story in one slide of the most significant changes that you will hear more about. So the changes between last year's budget and this year's draft budget is all presented here on the slide. So for our tax supported departments, there's an increase to contracted roads repair and maintenance. There's a large increase to contracted sidewalk repairs and maintenance. There's added staff capacity in public works. That's 2 full-time positions. There's a commitment to a staffing resource in asset management, and an increasing cost of our RCMP members. And then generally across all the departments, there are rising costs due to inflation and supply chain tension. And then talking about the utility departments, which are covered by our utility charges, there's a higher cost of water, which we purchase from the Mount View Regional Water Services Commission. There's our water system ongoing maintenance. There's higher waste commission member fees. The waste department, solid waste department's also seen higher contract costs due to inflation and fuel surcharges. And then there's lagoon maintenance projects that are planned. So just briefly, before we get into the capital budget, we talk about what is budgeting. So there's the operating budget and the capital budget. The operating budget represents the day-to-day costs of town operations, and to provide its programs and services. And the capital budget is the town's financial plan for capital expenditures that will take place during the year. There's one change you'll see on the capital budget business cases this year is we tied in the type of capital project. So it's either going to be a new build, which means it's a new project or new building, something that we don't currently have, a maintenance item, or a renewal item. So those are proposed when existing assets show sign of significant deterioration in order to maintain the current level of service. And so the last two items is what you'll be seeing today. And of course, what is council's requirements for the budget? So council must adopt every year an operating budget. And if that's not adopted by year end, you can adopt an interim operating budget. And council also must adopt a capital budget for each calendar year. Sorry. Okay, so moving into the capital budget. This year we have 8 capital projects proposed for you, ranging from road construction projects to replacement of equipment. And I'm going to call on my colleagues, Craig Fox, to present the engineering and infrastructure items. And today, Kelsey Hotkins will be presenting the community service projects. So the first project up is for Mr. Fox.
All this does is emphasize the height difference between No, it's okay. I can manage. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see everybody. We're going to talk about Co-op Road. That's this project that's been on our capital budget, multi-year capital budget for several years. This project we started in 2022 with design engineering phases, and that process is currently ongoing, and survey was done, and we're working on the tender package at the moment. So this project is has experienced some increases due to the general increases in the market. I think, I can't remember the original number, but it's now at 1.28. Does anybody have any questions about co-op specifically?
I'm just curious, is that the worst road in Pittsburgh? Is that the most highest priority road needs repair and infrastructure?
The challenge with answering that question is I would kind of be wondering who's done the prioritization.
I would think you would.
Well, at this point in time, we're working off master plans that were conducted by ISL from 2006 forward. The multi-year capital plan was present when I got here. This one was on there. It's a very deteriorated road. It serves 17 of our businesses in our industrial area. Probably 50% of the road is 100% gone. So that's pretty much directly related to the drainage issues that are in the area. And so this project is to solve all that and restore the level of service that those businesses were expecting.
I'll add to that too, that our multi-year capital plan is in our budget package. So if anybody wants to refer to this presentation or our multi-year capital plan as well, the council has approved. Next to that, absolutely great.
You betcha. And I'll build a little bit more on that because the master plans are a key component to the building of our multi-year capital plan. It identifies the areas that are highest priority from a delivery of the critical services. So water, sewer are the critical services. Asphalt's a nice to have. So this isn't driven by asphalt, this is driven by infrastructure. The asphalt is deteriorated because the infrastructure isn't up to par. So that's kind of how we got here.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you betcha. All right, so we'll go, I got a few in a row here, so I'm just gonna get cozy. So this is a project 23rd Street Sanitary Main repair, I guess. This is about about a 40 meter section of line or 100 meter section of line. I can't remember off the top of my head at that moment, but we brought this one earlier, and what had been identified by operations was a full pipe sag in the pipe, and concrete debris and such was tucked in there. So we went through and we did our flushing. We've had 2 residential backups in the area on the low end of this pipe. It's going to continue to be a big problem, so it's better to resolve this one sooner than later. And we've tagged this one at about an $85,000. That's an internal bid based off of previous experience with local contractors. Does anybody have any questions about the sanitary main? All right, moving right along. This project has been brought, this is the 20th Street Asphalt Mill and Overlay Replacement Project. We're proposing a 2-year project for this one. It is possible to do it in 1 year, obviously, but with funding, it's easily broken up into two different phases. This is a result of the deterioration of the asphalt surface on our main street that has sort of been slowly ongoing for several years. In 2021, we made an attempt to do a restorative attack, I would say, to that segment of road, but the deterioration was widespread, and the restoration process didn't result in a satisfactory surface. And we've received numerous complaints, and we're very aware of some of the challenges that were faced by the people down there. So this project is to go down there. We'll mill off the top 40 mills. We'll probably put back 50 mills, give it a bit better of a crown, create better drainage, that sort of thing. Cut out the concrete curbs to be more standardized. A few little minor tweaks, but a recent contractor bid gave us the 125 to do from 20th Avenue down to 19th Avenue. So we'd go to the south side of the 20th Avenue intersection. And then in 2023 or 2024, holy smokes, time's flying. In 2024, we'd be looking at doing from the south side of 19th Avenue to the tie-in point just in front of, I think previously Dick's Auto, maybe still Dick's Auto, Value Drug Mart area, where we brought the new asphalt up from 15th Avenue there. So it would restore the asphalt running surface over 2 years from the new asphalt on the south end all the way up to 20th Avenue. So first year is 125. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, for this one, I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey.
I do have, just about I looked back at our old monthly capital plan, so the road was 680,000. So that's quite substantial.
Yeah, so
What are your reasoning there?
there was a twitch with Co-op Road. So back in 2020, I think was the last time we had looked, when we were forward planning for Co-op Road. There was a big push from the government to come up with shovel-ready projects. And what we had done at the time is pared down the scope of work, used the contract rates that we had at the time, which was the 15th Avenue storm main replacement, made some rough estimates for sanitary, and applied that number to put that forward for a shovel-ready project. So we were hoping to get a lot of infrastructure replaced for very little of our investment, but not the full scope of work that kind of is necessary to be done. So it was marginal for shovel ready, I would call it. So that number got derived out of that process. ISL's number has always been around over $1 million. So the engineer's estimate, so if you looked before the 2020 multi-year capital plan, you'd see Co-op Road at just around $1 million, and then it dropped, and then it's back up to the full scope, the proper scope, but now we've had some inflationary pressures on that.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Good morning. So this project is the Memorial Complex lobby improvements. So the Memorial Complex front lobby services everyone who walks through the facility. This project will see the recoating of the cracked Memorial Complex front lobby and Aquatic Center lobby flooring with rubberized non-slip coating. At the same time as the floor replacement, the cracked front entry door frame will be repaired. As you can see in the photos on the left, the flooring is cracked throughout both lobbies and is considered a tripping hazard. The door frame is also cracked, and there are fundamental concerns about the foundation and underlying concrete. This is allowing heat to escape from the building, and sometimes the doors are inoperable, causing a security issue. The photo on the right is the proposed flooring replacement, a durable product that was recently used in the Colts dressing room upgrade and has proven to be slip resistant and safe. This project was planned to be replaced in 2023 on the multi-year capital plan. The project is expected to cost $50,000, and administration is proposing funding be allocated from the Recreation Facility Reserve. I can try to answer any questions.
Any questions? I I have a comment that I'm glad to see we're getting away from that product that's been there since 1993. And they've used it too many times, even in the pool. So that's good. I'm glad to see that moving away from that. Opposed to moving away from that.
Okay, this project is the train station exterior painting project. So the train station is a designated provincial historical resource with Alberta Culture and is home to many community users in Didsbury. This project will see the full exterior repainting of the Didsbury train station facility, deck, and surrounding railings. As you can see in the photos, the paint on the building is peeling in multiple locations. The facility was last painted in 2014 and has deteriorated over time. The new paint is expected to provide a layer of protection to the building. Because of its provincial status, half of the project is eligible to be funded from Alberta Culture. The total project cost is $65,000, requiring $32,500 to be funded from the town. Administration is proposing our portion of funding be allocated from the train station maintenance reserve. If Alberta Culture does not approve the project, it would come back to council. Project approval through Alberta Culture is anticipated to occur during the winter months, with painting commencing in the summer. This project would need to follow all of the Alberta Culture standards and guidelines. Any questions?
Councilor Baswick?
Thank you, Mayor. The question I have, by looking at the pictures, it looks to me like there's substantial damage to the wood structure. Is that, I notice it says painting, but is there anything for rebuilding, like a stair railing, that type of thing? It looks like it's crumbling.
See, I'm tracking. So, to answer your question, there is a portion of the railings and the ramp that need to be rebuilt due to damage to the wood. And that's actually part of the operating budget because it's only pieces and parts of the wood that will be pulled up and replaced. So on top of, before the painting's done, those repair works would be completed, and then the paint.
And then, how much do we have in the reserve?
Do you have it? I'll have to check in the budget document. Let me sit down.
40,000 something.
So on page 16 of your budget document, there's the reserve balances.
Okay.
And the train station maintenance reserve has approximately $43,000. So it would cover the painting portion of the project.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't find it. So I thought I'd make it easier, I would ask you. No problem. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Don't see any.
Okay, so this project is the curling rink HVAC replacements. It's 2 units. So the curling rink HVAC units service the upper and lower floors within the facility by providing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. This project will see the replacement of both units to ensure occupant comfort with regulated air ventilation. The photo on the left is the HVAC unit that services the lower level, and the HVAC on the right services the upper level. Both units are over 25 years old and are experiencing performance issues, limiting the amount of air conditioning and heat to reach the upper floor and causing poor ventilation for the lower floor. Replacement parts are unavailable due to the age of the unit. This project is expected to cost $55,000, and administration is proposing funding be allocated from the Recreation Facility Reserve. Any questions?
I'm sure you're prepared for many questions, but I don't see any. I'm sorry that we can't have any for you. Thanks, Kelsey.
I'll pass it over to Craig.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so this is to present 2 vehicles from Public Works that are long overdue for replacement. These ones were identified on using the replacement schedule in the asset management plan that was presented to council. Last year, we bumped the one vehicle to this year just to because we had a parks vehicle and a public works vehicle last year, and one vehicle was a little bit more a priority than the one that we're presenting today. It doesn't mean it's not necessary, but it was the other one was needed for the trailer and asphalt equipment and such. So the two vehicles we're presenting to you today, one is the water operator's vehicle. It's the one we run around with meter readings on. It's the one on the left, PW11. It's got significant body damage on it due to deterioration, not due to incident. It's mostly rusted out around the wheel wells and the back of the cabs. PW03 is very similar in body stature, I guess, or condition, becoming very rusted out. Inside the vehicles are pretty rough as well, just due to the number of years they've got on them. So we've got the two vehicles up here for today for $150,000. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Do we, like there is a vehicle supply shortage, is that, or is that just in some cases, and cost of them are getting, I've watched where companies change the price on contracts recently to get the product that people have ordered months ago, but the price changes, so is that, I'm sure it's factored in there, but do you anticipate anything like that?
We touched the market again. So there's an interesting and really unique thing about municipal vehicles. We're not looking for the bells and whistles. We're not looking for the backup this and that's. We're looking for base model vehicles, low. It's all the whizzy-bangy semiconductor stuff that is really challenging to get and causes a big delay. Whizzy-bangy stuff? Yeah. And the semiconductors too. So we're lucky in that, and we noticed this last year when we went through the purchasing. They were like, when we walked in there, it's going to be a year. Then we talked to them about the model we wanted. It was 8 months, and we got it in 6. So it's kind of that sort of, we're in a different market. And we're also very malleable. If we go to market for new, we can't get what we're looking for the value we've come to you with, we'll start looking elsewhere. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks for that. Councilor McCoy?
I wonder if there's an opportunity to buy back leases or to reduce costs. Like, some people flip their truck every couple of years, and that could save us a substantial amount of money, potentially.
There's arguments on both sides of used vehicles, but like I said, if we go for new, we can't achieve it for the budgets that we get assigned to us. We'll go to the next level and look at alternates. If it comes down to condition ratings, because we'd probably apply our same asset management approach to a used vehicle. Is there damage on it? Is there miles? Is there, what's the age of it? That sort of thing, and come up with a predetermined sort of level on our asset management plan. Because it would be an important piece of information to know what's the value of the reduction in cost.
Yeah, that's absolutely
Cool.
Just one more. The other question I had was the guy that does the metering, the person that does the metering in the truck. Is the metering equipment huge, or could it fit in a town car? I'd like to buy a truck.
Is it relative to this topic?
Well, it is. They're very complicated.
Well, it's about equipment on the truck, so that's a different conversation. We talk about the truck purchases, so by all means hold that for another, maybe for our roundtable this afternoon. What's the equipment part of this?
Sorry, I had conversations coming in 2 years.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate the comments, though. All righty, we'll move on to skid steer. So this one is a bit of a sad story. This piece of equipment was busy doing its job in late spring, removing the ice from the arena, when it whiz-banged and spit out a bunch of fluids all over the floor. We blew a hydraulic pump on the one side, and it's no longer functioning. So we went into the how do we get it fixed mode. We talked to Komatsu and we talked to a number of distributors around town and in the neighborhood, and parts for it aren't readily accessible. They want about $20,000 for the pump. They can't guarantee when it would come to us. There's 2 pumps in the unit. They're both the same age. So there's a good chance that the second pump is well within its time to fail. So now we're kind of looking at maybe $40,000 in an unknown time frame. So we started looking at the equipment as maybe past its useful life from a municipal perspective. And we had a Bobcat, an additional Bobcat replacement on the multi-year capital plan 2 years out. And so this machine decided that we had expected too much out of it, so it gave up the ghost early. So we're looking to replace it this spring. That will be dependent on availability, obviously, but we're looking to get a the mower for this one because it's got the tracks on it. This is the one that we go rough cutting ditches and things like that with it. So we're looking for a mower for it as well. So at $130,000 from the equipment reserve.
Questions for anyone?
All right.
All right, so going back to our capital budget summary page, that is the proposed 2023 capital budget. And again, there's 8 projects there presented by Craig and Kelsey. Of those projects, each of the slides had where we're proposing the funding to be from. There's one project, the Co-op Road project, being funded from the MSI Capital grant. And then there's one project, which is 20th Street Asphalt Mill and Overlay, which would be funded from the operating budget. It's currently part of the contracted repair and maintenance line. And then the remaining balances would be funded from the town's reserves for various departments. And so anytime, all of this that we propose, we have the reserve balances for that. And we've documented that in your budget document if you want to look at those balances that are available. So that wraps up the capital portion of the presentation. Is there any remaining questions on that section?
Councilor McCoy?
I don't see 23rd Street from Highway 582 to the town boundary.
So that, the 23rd, or sorry, can you say that again?
23rd Street from 582 to the town boundary.
So I would like to, again, just, those are good questions, but there are roundtables this afternoon for items that aren't on there. So again, Councilor McCoy, please bring it up this afternoon for items that you feel might be missing from the capital budget. And I have just a question about our MSI, and it's getting that really deplete our MSI, and we don't have much hope in the future for getting building like we have been able to build because of the 40% cut that the government has assessed in this MSI, and then 35% cuts that they're going to assess going forward. So I guess you as our CFO coming down to that, you know, the 218,000 left in that reserve going forward, and I can certainly pass this afternoon, but I guess, have a concern about that being that low, and then the fact that our funding is going to become lower as well. So that just reference that on page 15.
Right, and so with the MSI Capital Reserve, we had built it up. There's some communities that spend it the year they get it, and others kind of save it to use it for different projects. So we're getting about $540,000 allocated in 2023, and looking forward, we're either going to have to do smaller portions of projects each year, depending on what the project is, or wait and do a project every other year, or council may decide to start putting more money into the operating budget for road projects and water and sewer replacement projects as well. And then there's always competitive grants. So when we see there's like the STIP grant, Strategic Transportation, I don't know the acronym, but there was one we applied for a couple of years ago for 19th Avenue downtown. And so we're always looking for those competitive grants that we can also apply for, just to try to bring more funding in and be able to do as many projects as possible for the town.
Looking dreary with that MSI coming to that level, we've seen such a good healthy balance in there for our much needed projects. But thanks for that.
All right, so if there's nothing else on the capital budget, then we will move on to the operating budget. And bear with me because you will hear me a lot for this part of the presentation. So, of course, going back to what is the operating budget. So our operating budget is made up of a large number of expenditures. We're a service-based organization. And those expenditures have to be offset by revenues, and the balance needs to come down to zero. So I'm going to start the presentation by explaining to you the budgeted expenditures for 2023, and then we'll talk about the revenues that are going to be used to offset those. So, and anytime I talk about budget, 2023 budget, of course I'm meaning the draft proposed budget. I just may not say those words every time. So this is all open for council's discussion and deliberation, and until that final resolution to approve the budget has occurred, none of these numbers are set in stone. What I'm going to do is, the way that the budget's outlined on the slide is by object code, and these are kind of the key areas that as an organization we spend money. And so I like to look at it from this lens because and then just describe like the differences within those buckets of money. And I find that gives you a better picture of the budget as a whole. So every year you're going to see our largest expenditure is salaries and benefits. And again, that's because we're a service-based organization. In 2023, the budget's proposed at $4,822,000, which is an increase over 2022 of about $544,000. And on this slide, you'll see just the trend from 2019 to 2023 of where we've been each year. So in 2019, we were at about $4 million of salaries and benefits. This is the budget, again, for each of these years. And we dipped down. We had some fun couple of years in there that were altered significantly because of COVID. 2022 brought us back to a mostly normal year. And then 2023 is, again, normal in the sense of none of these kind of COVID restrictions are happening. And but there is an increase, and so I'll talk about that. First of all, I wanted to show you 23 compared to 2022. This is the makeup of salary and benefits, and it hasn't really changed much. So when you're looking at the slide of the donut, I prefer donuts over pies. So the bulk of the money is for salary and wages. That's about 82% of the overall budget. 6% for each year is for the town's pension plan, which we're part of the local authority's pension plan. About 6% this year is for employee benefits, which saw a significant increase. Benefit plans are seeing some inflationary pressures as well. About 4% of the budget is for CPP, Canada Pension Plan. 1% is the employer portion of EI, and then 1% for WCB. On the next slide, here's the breakdown of the 544,000 change. I know, this is a pie.
That's for Ethan.
Yeah.
I like pie.
So of the 544,000, 72% is salaries and wages, 13% is benefits, 8% is pension, 5% is CPP, and 1% EI, and 1% WCB. And then we're looking at that a different way now, on another pie chart. A pumpkin pie? No. So this explains it in a different way. What is that 544? So approximately $201,000 is for new positions. So we talked about 2 new public works positions. There's also half of a seasonal parks position. So in the summer, parks positions are full-time. We had 4.5 positions budgeted in 2022, and there are 5 budgeted for in 2023. And that's only a seasonal summer position, so it isn't a huge budgetary impact. So that's the blue section there. And then the kind of burnt orange section on the bottom, 189,000 is for impacts of changes in 2022, which impact the 23 budget. So when you bring staff on partway through the year in 2022, and we only budgeted for a part of that staff in 2022, we're now having an impact to the 2023 budget. So for example, you added a full-time public works position in 2022. That was at 6 months, so July 1st to December 31st, we had half of their cost in the 2022 budget, and now we have a full year of their costs in the 2023 budget. So there's that position. A similar thing happened with the peace officer, which went from a part-time position to a full-time position partway through the year. And then most recently with hiring a planning position, a planner, which wasn't budgeted for in 2022. We just used our surplus money to pay for that in 2022, but now their full cost is hitting the 23 budget. Now with that one, we are seeing a significant decline elsewhere in the budget in the contracted or professional services line, so that is offset somewhat. And then the other 2 pieces of the pie is cost of living adjustment, which is for the staff across the organization of $103,000. And then the increased cost of employee benefits, which is about $50,000. And we are looking at other benefit providers. We just don't have that information at the time, which is now. So that's salaries and benefits.
Question from Councilor Windsor.
Thank you, Mayor. Amanda, the $50,000 for the benefits, is that what's incurred because of the new employees? Or is that incurred for inflationary reasons?
That would be both. So there's new employees coming on, and so that's an added benefit cost. But there's also increase, I think our initial estimate was about 22% in our premiums over the year before. So for all the other employees already on the benefit plan. %, yeah. Okay, so moving on to professional development. Each year we allocate professional development for training, which could be mandatory training depending on the position. There's conferences that we attend for educational purposes and networking purposes. And there's travel and subsistence that goes along with all that. So here I've outlined the cost of professional development in a bar chart for the 2019 to 2023 years. And so as you can see, since 2019, we've actually come down quite a bit in our costs, especially on the staff side of things. And what we were finding is professional development is not very consistent year to year. So one year we might need all of our lifeguards to get their recertifications, and then you don't need that again for 3 years, and that can happen in any of the departments. And so, or like they might just be offering the training for the arena operator course, but it's in Grand Prairie. So, and next year it's in Calgary. So we're gonna take it next year when it's closer to save on travel costs. So those are the type of things that we look at. And so how we're able to keep the cost actually lower in 2023 is because and this will be a further discussion, but we're proposing that we take the surplus from 2022 and allocate it to a new reserve, and then put some parameters around that allows the CAO to approve people for courses that are outside kind of the plan for the year. So if something comes up that was unexpected that we need, that we could go that way instead of having it be a budget impact and then ending up with a surplus. So we can talk about that more. And if anyone wants me to clarify that, I can. But so basically we're kind of just even keel here for 23, except for it's a bit of a reduction because we don't have as many CPO peace officer trainings that are required, but everything else is basically same as 2022 for the staff. And then we also kept councils, it's rounded up, but same amount of professional development expenses for council at this time as well.
Councilor Windsor has a question?
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned the reserve, Amanda, for things coming up and just on the spot kind of approvals. Is that included in this, or is that additional to this?
That would be additional to this. So what would happen is at the end of 2022, we would come to you with what the surplus balance was for training across the organization. We would ask you to reserve it as well as come up with some sort of policy framework behind it. And then that would be kind of a new item on our reserve schedule. And then whatever the parameters are, you might delegate that authority to the CAO. You might want the authority, but that's additional to answer your question.
So this isn't, the reserve isn't part of the operating budget, it would be addressing a surplus at the end of the year?
Yes. So it's not there at the time because we don't actually have a reserve to pull from, so it's not included in there.
And we don't know our surpluses.
Yeah. Okay, so the next significant item is professional services. And as I'm going through this, I'm not going to hit every single budget line for expenditures, but just address the significant items. So professional services is spent on things like our annual audit. We have an assessor for assessment, planning services, legal, engineering, and building inspectors. So you can see the breakdown year over year on this slide. And we've decreased from $308,000 to about $190,000. And the biggest change there is in the planning department with the planner. Now that we've hired an internal planner, we've really scaled that back from $125,000 to $10,000 in 2023. And you might remember, but of the $125,000, $40,000 was to complete the MDP in 2022, so that's still ongoing. But as part of that, council approved a transfer from reserves to cover that. So as those costs, because we're not done that obviously, but as those costs are incurred, they will continue to be covered from the reserve. So that is not another budgetary impact at this time. We also have a line called other contracted services. So this is where we hire contractors to do different services for the town. And some of the, I should have had this on the slide, but the change is, it's a decrease as well of $168,000 from last year. So, and that's because of a couple of things. So it's a mixture of some increases, but also some decreases. So the biggest increase we're seeing is for the waste collection contract, and the budget has increased by about $24,000 due to inflation and also fuel surcharges. So as the fuel prices were high and remain high, we are charged a surcharge because the majority of that contract is like trucking and hauling. So that's why it's tied to fuel prices. So that increase of $24,000 is offset by a few things. So I'm going to skip the ECDEV one for a minute. The Open Spaces Asset Management Plan happened in 2022. We had $40,000 budgeted for that, which was offset by a grant. That project's now done, and so we're able to decrease the contracted services for parks for $40,000. There's also septic cleanouts at the campground. We had budgeted $14,000 in 2022. We're decreasing that by $13,000 for septic cleanouts at the campground due to the project, which was approved by council, of tying in the sanitary system. And then back to the economic development one. So in 2022, we had some significant services budgeted for the economic development department. What we've done here in the budget is we've kind of scaled it back completely to just basic level of service budget for economic development. if you're looking at your departmental budget line, which is in your budget document, you'll be able to see that for that department. But the plan is to, until the time that an economic development plan is in place and approved by council, we would just keep that basic level of service. That doesn't mean we're not doing anything here. That means that we're working on a plan that would tie into the strategic plan that you guys are in the process of right now. And then if there's things that our economic development officer or the plan says we're doing, we would come and ask you to use the reserve for economic development. So again, this budget line is so far very underspent for this year, and that's where the reserve balance is proposed to come from. So once our year-end balances are in place, we will bring you the ECDEV surplus and propose to reserve that back into ECDEV to use for future projects based on what the plan says. Clear as mud?
Say that one more time.
Sure. So in 2022, council approved a significant budget for economic development, and but we weren't able to get a lot of those things accomplished. And the reasoning for that is kind of the lack of having a clear plan. And so what we're going to do at the end of the year, in early 23, we'll bring you the surplus and ask you to reserve that into the economic development reserve. And then once a plan is in place, we'll come to you and say, okay, we need $10,000 for this activity. Will you fund it from the reserve? You can say yes or no. It should be in line with this approved plan, and then that's how we'll accomplish things.
Thank you.
Well, just to add to that,
it was a way to, because some of these things that Alexa has some great ideas on, they're not necessarily confined to within a specific year, and we didn't want to keep having a conversation and rebudget those monies when she wasn't even able to use them yet. And so our thought was, let's put a vision together, and we're going to have some follow-up sessions with Alexa and council to identify those priorities and some of those cool extra type things that we'll put in the plan that gets approved. And then once it's approved by council, then it'll be funded by the reserves, and then that way we don't have to keep wrestle over what to budget for each year and rebudgeting those same monies. And then that way, so what's in the budget is just kind of the day-to-day ECDEV work that Alexa does, and the extra things will be part of the plan funded from the reserve. So that helps.
Okay. So the next budget item is our contracted municipal policing. This is used, this money pays the RCMP for 4 members that are specific to Didsbury, and we're responsible for the cost of. So in 2022, the budget was $539,000. That was for 4 officers, and in 2023, we're projecting a cost of $655,000, also for 4 officers. In 2022, we were able to use some of the savings from the previous year end to reduce that budget line. And that's why we're seeing quite a big increase in that cost for the same number of officers. That tied with the retroactive pay raise that the RCMP were approved for is also driving up the cost. So it is a budget increase of 22%, and it's about 5% of our total expenses for those 4 officers. And then, just one second. I'll be with you in 1 second. And then we do get somewhat of a grant to offset the cost of this. It's called the MPEG grant, Municipal Policing Assistance Grant. And that's expected to stay the same. So that's about $241,000, which offsets the costs of the officers. Now, council we'll talk about this later this afternoon, but there is an opportunity for council to increase the number of officers for the community, and that would come at an additional cost to the budget. So right now it's $655,000 that's in the budget. And is there questions?
Yes, as far as the retroactive pay is concerned, has that been fully determined that we're going to be paying it? Because I understand there's lots of lobbying going on that we shouldn't have to, that the federal government should cover it.
Is that up here on the screen?
No, that's not. No, as far as I'm aware, that hasn't been finalized.
That isn't in this.
Is the cost in there?
The cost going forward is, but not the retro, whatever the costs of previous years would be.
I think
That's a good roundtable addition, because that is a concern, and I think that, again, Councillor Morgan can hold that too, to bring that up in our round. But it might be important in our budget that it's discussed.
Okay, anything else on policing? Okay, we'll move on to repairs and maintenance. So, where we have seen some savings in some of the lines I've talked about so far, repairs and maintenance would not be one of them. We have done some, we have gotten some direction previously from council, although not official, but we've implemented that direction in this year's budget. So we are seeing an increase of about $305,000 in road rehabilitation or roads repairs and maintenance. We're increasing that budget line by $250,000. And remembering back to our capital presentation, 125 of that is proposed to go to that mill and overlay project on 20th Street. There's also our annual sidewalk repairs and maintenance that we do. This is where we have sections of sidewalk around town that have failed, and we're replacing the sidewalk, curb, and gutter. And for several years now, it's been at $80,000. Actually, previous to, I think, 2019, and before it was $96,000. So we had scaled it back at that time. For 2023, we're proposing an increase of $25,000 to $105,000. So that would just allow us to get more sections of the sidewalk replaced. And then there's an increase to vehicle and equipment repair and maintenance. We are seeing that these service costs are higher. Places that we're taking our equipment and vehicles to be serviced are increasing their costs. So we've added $14,000 to the vehicle and equipment line. Building repairs and maintenance, a similar, let me start again. So the big increase in the building repairs and maintenance line is actually to account for those the railing and ramp repairs at the train station. And then our utility infrastructure R&M budget has stayed the same, and same with trails. Any questions on that one?
Really a question. So the $250,000 in the road rehab is additional funds over last year. And
that's correct.
the that's something that was made clear that we wanted more money on that, and that's good to see. Thank you.
Okay. So, although it hasn't changed, our debt servicing, which is principal and interest payments on long-term debt, it stayed the same. So we haven't taken on any new debt, and that is why, and we haven't paid anything else off. So also, you'll find interesting, every other slide I put 2023 first, and in this one, 2022. So yeah, across the board, the payments are the same, and we are paying less in interest as time goes on and more to principal. That's the only difference.
You should have asked if we noticed anything different about it.
Okay, so another large expenditure line for us is grants and payments to organizations. So on this slide, which I haven't showed you yet, this is the funnest slide in the batch, and the least, I don't like it because it's not like a chart or a graph, but you might like it. It's not a donut. So this shows the payments to our organizations, and so I'll just go through them. We have the Didsbury Municipal Library payment of $252,000. We've just kept that the same. That is an item for this afternoon to discuss. The Parkland Regional Library System is about $46,000, which is the same from last year. Actually, I noticed as I was prepping for this that should decrease slightly because there was a change in the population. So that amendment will have to happen to the budget. It's a couple $100, I think. The Didsbury Museum, $31,000. That stayed consistent for the last couple of years. The Mountain View Regional Waste Management Commission is $132,864. That's my estimate, because at the time of making this slide, I didn't have the finalized numbers. I'm not sure if they are finalized, but I think somebody's nodding. So that may be updated as well once we get those final numbers. For FCSS, I lump it into that, but we're actually paying multiple other organizations, and $64,000 is what we've paid for several years, because we've taken half of our grant from the province to fund out to other organizations, and the grant from the province is staying the same again. They just announced it's the same for the next 3 years again, so that's why those payments remain the same. Didsbury Neighborhood Place, that's our internal department, but there are funds that go there from our community services department as well, so $24,525 to offset the cost of operating that facility. And then the council community grant program, this would be barring the year-end surplus. So for 2 years now, we've had this program, and it's funded from the previous year's year-end surplus. So as long as we have a surplus of at least $300,000, I believe, then you'll be able to fund $30,000 for this. So that $30,000 will depend on the year-end surplus for 2022, and because it's 10% of whatever that surplus is, that would go to that fund. And then the last one on here, and which is new this year, is STARS Air Ambulance, and at which meeting was it? So STARS presented to council and requested a commitment of funding to them of $2 per capita, so that's $10,140. It's in this version of the budget, and that again is a discussion item for later this afternoon, whether council wants to commit to that funding for this year and possibly for multiple years. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. Amanda, the community grant program, although it's in here as a budget item, which it has to be, doesn't necessarily impact the tax because it comes out of the surplus from the previous year, correct?
That's correct. So there will be an offsetting revenue reserve transfer that completely offsets that item. Okay, so the transfers to reserves is an expense item. And we'll just do this last slide and then take a break here before we go into the revenues. So this is just a listing of what's in the 2023 budget for transfers to reserve. We're allowed to, the MGA stipulates we're allowed to make these reserve transfers from the operating budget each year. And what it is it's financial commitment for future sustainability of our service providing assets and various operating departments. So it's pretty consistent from the prior year. Recreation facilities has seen a transfer of $244,700. Trails and pathways, $8,475. Vehicle and equipment replacement, $257,000. Our water department for capital and operating is $466,320. That, you remember, we increased quite a bit a couple of years ago to start putting money into building up the reserve for the reservoir project that's on the multi-year capital. The wastewater reserve is currently $101,060. The RCMP facility, so those are funds to improve the detachment in town, $10,000. The fire hall building itself, and that was new in 2022, $5,000 for future repairs there. Fire capital equipment, it's actually seen a decrease, but $90,000. So that's down $10,000 from the previous year. And we have a good kind of projection of what future equipment's going to look like. And we're kind of at near the end of replacing those big assets at this moment. So we have kind of quite a bit of time to build up that reserve again. Our municipal enforcement reserve transfer for things like replacement of their vehicles and their radios would be $15,000. And then all of our reserves earn interest money, and that goes back into the reserve. So we're projecting $40,000 of interest to be earned there. Any questions?
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. You indicated the fire capital, you've decreased that 10,000. Is there any other significant decreases or increases?
No, everything else I believe has stayed the same from 2022.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering about the interest earned. Does that go to specific reserves? If not, does it go to some general fund?
It's actually, it goes back into the reserve that it's earned on. So depending on the reserve balance, if the balance is higher, it would have more of that interest. Okay, take a break.
I think there'll be more questions after the break.
Okay.
Everybody's absorbing a lot of information right now. Thanks for that. So you want to go to break now for 15?
Yeah.
Come back at 25 to 11. And we'll start without you if you're not here. So, no, well, I'm not talking to council because Amanda's always here on time.
Oh. Except when I'm on my computer break.
Hi, Craig. Nice to meet you as well.
So you're good for?
Yes, next week, I think like 14th or 15th, you said, yeah, and it said afternoon or morning, whatever.
Our operating budget, which is the revenue side, the side that we're all very interested in.
Sure. If I said no?
We're interested in it all. If you said no? Oh. Okay, then will you please stand up and present
Okay.
the revenue side of the operating budget?
Well, yeah, I'm worried about that. I pointed that way, but things like that. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your break. So again, we're going to jump into the revenue section of the operating budget. So we cannot budget for a deficit or a surplus, so our total revenues will equal our total expenses. And that is the $12,984,484. If you go back to your expenditure slide, you'll see that same number. On our expenditures, the biggest expense is our salaries and wages. On our revenue, the largest revenue is revenue from taxes. And so, although that's the first item up here, I'm going to just skip over it for the time being because that there's other factors that come into play there. The second largest revenue item is our utility user charges, and I'm also going to skip over that for the time being because we have kind of a whole section on utility departments and utility revenue and expenses. So moving on, I'll be speaking about the government operating grants, which is actually the third highest line. And I've broken it out on the next slide to show you the grants that are coming in from the federal government, the provincial government, and our neighbor at Mountain View County. So from the federal government in 2023, we're projecting $15,000 for the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, but we won't have the Can Export Grant. We're not projecting that at this time, and the Municipal Asset Management Program. Although we have applied for a second round of that grant, we haven't heard whether we're successful or not. So the Canada Summer Jobs Grant would cover our seasonal, anybody who's a student position for hired in the summer to care for the Summer Fun Program. We have the 5 positions in parks, and we have 2 summer positions budgeted for public works. So provincially, we receive Municipal Sustainability Initiative, or MSI, operating grants each year. And so we're projecting that to stay roughly the same as last year at $173,000. And that can be used for, it has a very broad use, basically anything operating to, that the town partakes in. And currently we have it broken out to fund our library costs for $75,000, our aquatic center for $70,000, and the remainder is in our administration department to cover IT costs. So that's our regular, we expect that kind of every year. And the Municipal Policing Assistance Grant I spoke to briefly, and that's to cover or to offset costs of paying for policing in our community. And that grant is not expected to change in 2023. So we receive about $241,000 there. So the Alberta Community Partnership Municipal Intern line actually is showing zero. However, we did just receive news that we were approved for an intern for 2023. So that's an administrator, not a finance intern that we had in the past. And so there will be a change to the budget. That information came in after all of this was put together. So. And then for social services, we get money from the government to cover, or from FCSS, and that's $262,000. And then the Mountain View County, our ICF agreements, we receive funding from Mountain View County for both shared services or shared facilities and social services. So the shared facilities would be our recreation facilities and our library, and we're projecting an increase as that fund is tied to CPI. I put 5% in this budget, but the last I looked at it, it was about 6.8%. So depending on where it is at the end of the year, that line item will be adjusted for CPI. And then social services, that's FCSS funding that we get from the county for their residents who partake in our programming, and it's tied to their grant from the province, so that stays the same at roughly $45,000. So in total, we're looking at about $1.2 million in operating grant transfers for 2023.
Councilor McCoy, and then Councilor Windsor.
To the shared services for Mountain View County, can you break down that lump, that 490, into what's fire, recreation, and library?
Yeah, so our fire service revenue, it's actually accounted for as fee for service. So it's in our it's in the sales and user fee line on the budget, and so of that, it's allocated to the aquatic center, the arena, and our parks department. Were you looking for specific amounts?
No, just like it's 50-50. I just wanted to know what they're paying for recreation.
Yeah, that's all. And library, I guess, is in there. So, let me look.
Can you get back to me?
Well, they're per capita in our ICFs, right, so, is that what would be the best?
Yeah,
References the ICF per capita.
right.
And
So about 43,000 of that is the library portion, and then the remaining is recreation.
thank you.
And as the mayor said, it is a per capita amount, so it's not based on our population in town, it's based on the rural Didsbury population.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. I have two questions. First of all, for Canada Summer Jobs, it sounded to me like, Mandy, you were saying that the number of summer employees that we're going to have is relatively the same as we had last year. And I'm wondering if the program has dropped or why there's a reduction in the revenue there.
Well, there's a reduction in the revenue because last year's budget was too high. We only received around that 15,000, so the calculation of that in 2022 was incorrect.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. The other one that I had a question about is the Alberta Community Partnership Municipal Intern. You indicated that the document is quite, you got information after the document was prepared and we actually did qualify. So is that going to impact the expense side as well?
That would be something, Ethan, can you talk to that? Would that be for council, like, decision? How that impacts?
Can I just, on that motion that we made, when we made it to go ahead and apply, wouldn't we have added something for our contributing part into this budget, since we did agree to apply for that grant, and then it would have been put in yours, whatever matching we had to do?
Yes, there is a match. So they cover up to $60,000 for 18 months, and then there's a portion that the town has to put in for the employee expenses. But
25,000 right now, just for that motion? But
we can pull that up at the break and then bring it back to you after lunch, if that works.
And sorry, if this is related specifically to you, you might repeat that again.
What I'm asking here is it's indicated that the revenue came in, or the notice of the revenue came in after this document was created, and I'm wondering if the expense side was included in the budget already, or if that will have to be added as well.
The expense side
For the intern,
Our portion of the intern.
the new intern.
for the new one that we're getting.
It's not, it's that,
I think your suggestion is best.
best to look at the motion.
yeah, that position is not currently budgeted for.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, it's not in the draft.
Can you still see that motion now?
Yeah.
All right, I see your hands up.
And maybe it's an appropriate time to speak to that will allow us, because, and we did just barely learn of it a couple days ago, but it will allow us to find some other savings in because there's some other service level that we won't need because of the use of that intern, so there'll be additional savings that we'll be able to pull out of the significantly more than the portion of cost we'll have, that we'll be able to pull out of the salaries and wages. And I can speak more to that after when we talk to the issues.
Yeah, so that's a relatively new item. We haven't had a ton of time administratively to even talk about how that's going to impact our budget. So going back to the revenue slide year to year, you'll see that a lot of the items are relatively the same budget-wise, so we don't have additional slides for many of these, but I'll just talk to them. In the sales and user fees budget line, there is a decrease, but part of that is the way that we're budgeting for the ice plant in 2023. So in the past, the ice plant, it's like an internal department where all of the expenses incurred go into that department, but the ice plant's actually split between the arena and the curling rink. So at the end of the year, we generate an internal revenue and create 2 more expenses to allocate these costs, 73% arena, 27% curling. And what we were doing by doing that is adding revenue and adding expense. We're almost double counting it because it was like an internally generated revenue and expense. So instead of showing it in the revenue, I'm actually in 23, we're just offsetting it with the expense in 2023. So a lot of that decrease in sales is because of that. And that it's kind of difficult to explain, but we're just trying to be consistent with how other internal departments are presented in the budget. Another example of it is IT. So we're just taking costs that are incurred for all of the organization, and we're allocating them to all the departments that they relate to, but not adding new revenue to do that. So sales and user fees overall are pretty consistent, and actually even a little bit higher if you take out the difference there that occurred because of the way we're accounting for the ice plant in the budget. And then in this budget, we're also breaking out lot sales. Lot sales is for the sale of lots in the Chant subdivision. And in the past, that was grouped in sales and user fees. So every time that I brought you the quarterly reports, our sales looked really low because we haven't sold any lots in Chant, so I wanted to break that out to make that really obvious that either we haven't sold lots, which you know is true, or in the case when we do sell lots, that'll be obvious as well. So the next item on the list is the franchise fees. And franchise fees is for revenue that we collect from ATCO Gas and FortisAlberta to allow those utilities to exist in our community. And every year, which happened a few meetings ago, council reviews the rates for franchise fees, and so you decide what the rates are going to be, and you've kept them the same for 2023. And even though you've kept them the same, there is an increase to the revenue that we're bringing in, and of $75,000. Now that's accounting for both increased consumption. So as new development comes on, they now are using gas and electricity, and they have to contribute to the franchise fees. So that's a portion of it. But also the franchise fee calculation itself is dependent on rates that are set by the utility companies. So as they increase those rates, even though our rate hasn't increased, there's going to be more revenue generated that way as well. And so that's the franchise fee revenue is helps us offset all of our expenditures that we've already gone through.
Brenda,
It's not specific to one department, sorry.
maybe you the council, I think we have to change the conversation about franchise fees, because we
don't actually set, we charge Fortis a fee. They choose to put it on their the consumer's bill. So it turns into the fact that we're doing this to the residents, but it's the companies, same as they charge us distribution and transmission, we charge them to have their infrastructure in our community. And it always is looked at by our municipalities as having assessed that to our residents, but it's actually Fortis assessing that to the residents. And all the other companies, the gas companies, put that on because they're being charged that. So I just would like to suggest that maybe we start, that conversation needs to change to the fact that Fortis and Direct Energy and whoever else are in our community with that infrastructure. We charge them for that, much like our new cell tower, and we start putting that conversation to them. I would just like to see, I know it, and I bring it up now just because we're talking franchise fees, and we always, our residents, it's something we do to make sure that Fortis pays to have their infrastructure here, and Direct Energy and whoever else. So
I just wanted to suggest that council, that conversation changes. Good, yeah.
Thank you. So moving along, the rest of the revenues, most of the remaining revenues are very consistent year over year. I have broken them out in more detail. So last year's budget would have shown fine and license, or penalties and fines on one line. I've broken them out because penalties are assessed on overdue accounts, whereas fines are for bylaw infractions or provincial government regulation infractions. And so I just wanted to break out the difference there. Licenses and permits, they previously were one line on our budget, and I've broken those out. Licenses are for animal licenses or business license fees. And permit revenue is mostly related to development and for building permits or plumbing and electrical and gas permits. The investment income, we have seen a recovery in interest rates. So we're seeing higher revenue there. And if you remember back though, to transfer from reserves, most of that, or transfer to reserves, sorry, most of that is generated in our reserves, which makes sense because we don't keep like an excessive amount of money in our operating account. So of the 75,000, 40,000 would be attributed to the reserve accounts. The other revenue line is kind of just everything else that doesn't fit in those other buckets, and it could be like the lease of the cell phone tower or donations or custom work kind of revenue, and a really minimal change there as well. And then the line called from reserve, so transfers from reserves, which is another allowable item in the as stipulated by the MGA, and you'll see a big decrease there this year. And so in 2022 we had quite a few transfers in to offset municipal taxes basically, and but in 2023 so far we're just proposing 2 transfers. So those would be the $30,000 or the amount to be determined depending on the year-end surplus for the to pay for the council community grant program. and $50,000 from the solid waste reserve to offset the fees that we charge our customers for waste pickup. We've been doing that for a few years, and because that reserve balance is enough to be sustaining that transfer, and it allows us to keep the rates down for those customers. So that's the summary of revenue from as a whole. Don't know how to use this now. That's summary of revenue for the town as a whole for the 2023 budget, and then I will go into the utilities and taxes. Is there any questions before I get there?
Councilor Windsor?
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. You talked about the sales and user fees, and the different change in that is essentially the ice plant budgeting change. Is that why we don't see that department, ice plant, in our line by line anymore?
Right. So yeah, if you look in your in the budget document, there's the budget by department, and so the revenue offset the expense, and that's why it's gone away from that line. Yeah. But the expenses are still there. They're in arena and they're in curling. Yeah.
You mentioned that reserve, so we're increasing water and wastewater fees in the proposed fee structure. I think we passed that the other, no, not yet. We've had it here, it went back to the committee. So what is that, 50,000 with those increases? That's just a static number then that you're proposing year to year? Because the 50,000 fits in there, even if we are raising rates and fees.
Mm-hmm. Well, the 50,000 is specifically for users that pay for the bin pickup, black, blue, and green bins. And so that's only residential customers, and it would offset that fee. So it's about $2 a customer that it's being reduced each month because of that offset. But then what it's also doing is offsetting a surplus. So if like the waste department consistently performs well, so if we have a surplus in that department or overall with the transfer, we won't need to transfer the full 50, and that's what's been happening. So, but I can go into the utility departments in more detail as well.
Councilor McCoy and Councilor Windsor.
Excuse me. The lot sales, they were budgeted in 2022 in the same amount in 2023. Did we sell a lot in 2022? So this is just an estimate.
Well, it's an estimate, but it's actually just offsetting subdivision. There's a subdivision department, and it does not impact taxes because the subdivision should pay for itself in lot sales. So each year, so we do have cost still of like borrowing costs on that land, and that's what's being offset with these revenues. And so there's no one single lot that's $240,595. I'm not projecting lot X as being sold this year. I'm just trying to offset the expenses so it doesn't impact taxes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. You talked about, Amanda, the from reserve and 30,000 from the community grant program to be announced based on the surplus. Because that's funded from reserves and it shows up in expenses and in revenues, it really has no impact, tax implications whatsoever, correct?
That's correct. So the way the program was set up, it would never have a tax impact.
missed that part. That's where you're gonna put them down. Most great thought. Okay. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay. So moving on to the, we'll talk about our utility departments and then we'll talk about taxes. So there's 3 utility departments and those are water, wastewater, and solid waste. And each of them are self-supported, and which means taxes don't offset them. So with the water, each of the departments, expenditures have to equal revenues. And you'll see on your departmental budget that it always comes down to 0 because it's not impacting taxes. But what we do have represented in the budget are the true costs of the department. So there's direct costs, which is the time and effort that you can directly attribute to working in any of those departments. And there's also overhead costs. So overhead is things like the oversight of the CAO of those departments, where his time isn't directly allocated there, but he, as the leader of the organization, oversees those departments. Or another example is our payroll costs of us doing payroll. There's employees in the water department, so that has to be attributed to that as well. You think of it as if these departments were standalone businesses, they would have all those costs. So that's why we're allocating overhead to those departments. And this is nothing new. This is the way we've been budgeting for a number of years. So with the water department specifically, some key increases which are going to impact your revenues. And so there's an increase in the water purchase costs. We got our water from the Mountain View Regional Water Services Commission. Is there a regional in that? Maybe not. Oh, okay. And so in 2022, until March 31st, 2023, the price is $1.86 per cubic meter. And then that price is projected to increase. Now that final number, I hear, will be released on December 14th after their meeting. So we've projected an increase in here of up to $1.95, but that number we don't actually know for sure yet. So it's still to be determined. And then the direct costs to run the department, including staff time, repairs and maintenance of the system, those are all attributed to the expenditures. And then there's an overhead allocation, as I was speaking to, which ensures the true cost is recovered. And a large item here is the transfer to the water reserve to assist in the cost of a future new reservoir. And how the revenue works for this department is there's 3 fees. There's an infrastructure fee, which covers the capital costs, and that includes that transfer to the reserve. It would include any costs of borrowing and water meters investments. Now these costs are allocated to the users based on the size of your water meter. So generally, if you're a residential home, you'll have 1 inch or less size water meter. And then if you're, depending on your business, industrial or institutional, you might have a 2-inch or 3-inch water meter. And that fee will be allocated accordingly. And that is the same rate each month that you'll pay once the bylaw is passed. And then there's 2 variable fees. One is for consumption, and that directly offsets the costs that we pay the Water Commission for water itself. And so we budget to earn enough revenue to pay for the water from the Water Commission. And currently there's a factor in the calculation of 1.6 for the unmetered water. And so we pay both the cost of the water and the cost of unmetered water that goes through our system. And then the third fee, which is variable, meaning it depends on how much water you use, is the distribution charge, and that would cover all the other costs to operate the department. The wastewater system works similar to the water, except there's only two revenue fees. One is the fixed infrastructure fee covering the capital costs, costs of borrowing, and the investment in our future sustainability, or that transfer to reserve amount. And again, it's allocated based on the size of your the meter servicing the property. And the second charge is the distribution charge, which would cover all the other costs to operate the department. And that's based on your water consumption as well. And then our third utility department is the solid waste department. And so it's a little bit different of a system. There's only a fixed monthly fee to cover, you get a basic service. Everybody would have a black bin, a blue bin, and a green bin if they're part of this service. And then they can also pay for an additional bin services for a cost. And so the expenditures themselves in this department would be the fees that we pay to the Waste Commission and the service cost of hiring our external contractor to do the pickup of the black bin, blue bin, and green bins. And also in this department is our spring cleanup cost, which we offer to all our residents. And new for 2023, the department has budgeted for a hazardous waste pickup day. So, and this department services about 2,040 customers. So that's an overview of the utility departments. And is there any questions?
Questions? I want to go back to the water.
Mm-hmm.
Where you say that the unmetered water. So anywhere in this expense side of the water, I know we've talked a lot about the unmetered water and how
We're proceeding with solving that. So is that in here? I know Craig had talked about the program. I'm just wondering if that's captured in here. If not, I can bring it up this afternoon.
I'll pass it over to Craig for that conversation.
Need a stool, Craig?
A little
This
one.
goes up and up. You push this.
Oh, it has fancy buttons. That's okay. Mic moves too. Sorry, can I just get some clarity on the question that you'd like to
So
answer?
we've talked about water loss, unmetered water, for the past few years. And there was at one point you had talked about a program to address that, and I wondered if it was in this budget this year, captured this program or the project itself in searching for unmetered water and water loss.
Sure, and thank you for the question.
Just before you start, it's interesting because we are preparing a report on that that's coming back on December 13th, but Craig can speak a little bit to give you a sneak peek.
Yeah, just, if it's in here, I guess the biggest part.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, and I'll keep it pretty high level with respect to budgets. So when earlier in the spring when we talked about this, we have professional services money in our operating budget year over year. Sometimes we use it, sometimes we don't. That's what we used to fund the exploration that we went on this year, and that's what we would plan to probably do a similar program next year to continue that on with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the professional services will cover that.
Yes.
in 2020. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, no. I'm very shocking today.
It's the carpet.
So, or the shoes that everyone was looking at.
Well, we weren't until now.
Are there any other questions about the utility department's budgets?
Councilman Coy?
So, just to clarify, I know you said it, but all three of those departments break even as far as cost to the town, correct?
Sorry,
All three of those departments come to a zero effect on the town.
on taxes, yes.
Oh, but I thought they had to cover for themselves. like-
They do, so, and that's how they're budgeted, so then, but there's still, yeah, so then in the overall budget, they show up as zero, so they're not impacting taxes.
I just want to,
It's not a question, it's a comment that you made about our waste performing well. That's interesting. So thanks for that.
Oh.
The town's waste system performs well.
she said, and I was wondering. You had to leave that. Proud of that. Okay, let's carry on.
We eat lots of fruits.
Okay, so to wrap up this section of the budget, and then we can all go for lunch, we'll talk about property taxes. So property tax revenue is what we ultimately use to cover any unfunded expenditures in our budget. So of course we have what we talked about, franchise fees and sales and user fees for different rec services, but ultimately we have to charge a property tax to account for anything else that doesn't have another revenue source for it. And property taxes itself is not just a number. It's made up of, it's a calculation of our assessment for the year times our tax rate, and that would generate the revenues. So first of all, we have to figure out what revenues we need, and then at that time, or while that's happening, we figure out what our assessment is for the year, and then that calculates the tax rate. And the tax rate might go up or down. Even if you kept the revenues that you need the same, the rate may go up or down depending on what assessment does. And we've actually seen that for the past 4 years where assessment has been changing and revenues were staying the same or going down, but assessment also went down and we had to increase the tax rate. So first, let's talk about property assessment, because we do have a preliminary projection of what our assessment will be for 2023. And assessment is based on the previous year's moment in time at July 1st. So 2023's assessment, and I know this wasn't in your slide package, but I can print it all for you as well. And don't worry about taking notes if I can provide you this.
I was going to take a picture.
So the what market values we're doing on July 1st, 2022 will project what our assessment is for 2023. And actually market values were maintained or actually even stronger. So we're seeing an increase in our assessment for the market value change or the inflation of about 79.7 million. So, which is good, it's strong, and our assessment, even without any development, is stronger than the year before. And then the second component to assessment would be our our growth, which is generated from development. So anytime somebody finishes a basement, or there's a completely new building built, like, trying to think of the year, but was Dairy Queen completed this year, or last year? So that's a bad example. But a new house is built, or a business is renovated, that's going to attribute to growth and development. So in 2022, that number accounts for, or on the 23 assessment, I guess, it accounts for $16.9 million. So our assessment value overall is projected to go up 12.6%. This is where if that revenue amount, the tax revenue that we need, stays the same, our tax rate would actually go down a whole bunch because the assessment value went up. So,
Define a whole bunch.
That's hard for an accountant to do.
You're putting me on the spot.
See that?
This is where words are important. Sorry.
You'll see that as we go through budget.
Yes. Yes, and all that, the rate itself will be a further discussion in the new year when assessments are finalized and requisitions have come out as well. So, but out of that growth, residential land and buildings have increased on average between 10 to 15%, and commercial and industrial land values have stayed the same, but the commercial and industrial building costs or assessments have increased about 13 to 15%. So that gives an overall non-residential increase of 10 to 15% as well. So both residential properties and non-residential properties will see an increase in their assessment of 10 to 15%. So going back to the property taxation revenue, in our draft budget, we have $5,713,000 and $23. That's an increase of $789,000, and which is 16% over the prior year. You can see this little image at the bottom. We can put the amount change in that orange box, and it'll tell you what the percentage changes. So as the discussions go on, we can use that to calculate the percentage change. And this gives you a 5-year look at what has been going on with net municipal taxation. This is the tax revenues used to operate the town. And just to clarify, we haven't talked about requisitions at all in this. Those are revenues in and expenses out, so they are not part of this conversation today.
Of that 789,000, how much of that is an increase in the tax required, like a percentage?
That's 16%.
The whole 16 is an increase in assessment? No.
Oh, and
like in taxes, right? Like, are we making is this projecting an increase in the mill rate?
Well, yeah, there would be an increase in the mill rate, even though assessment went up, because the revenue generated is larger than the change in the assessment. So
I'm just wondering how much of that 789 would be the increase in the mill.
Well, it's hard to determine that right now because we have to have further discussions about, council needs to decide how much of the revenue would be for residential to pay for and non-residential to pay for. So even if I gave you that number, it could be wrong, or it'll be different depending on what council decides. So what we'll do in the process is, once the revenues from taxes set, we will, as a group, talk about the split between residential and non-residential, and then those mill rates will come out of those discussions. Okay, so that's, if there's no more questions on that, that is our operating budget presentation.
And I think it's important too, and I'm sure everybody has, but the breakdown, I really appreciated that being in here, man, because that's what we asked for last year, and it's in here now. And I'm going to find the page. So the breakdown on the significant changes to the budget that are all there, and account for that $789,000. So those are the discussions that we go forward with when we start discussing additions or cuts, or adjustments. I don't like the word cut, just adjustments. So, but if everybody references that, I think it's a really helpful tool, and thanks for including that.
You're welcome. Yeah, and that's part of your budget document section of your binder. And for those, so it's the pages without page numbers.
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. I'm really impressed, not that I agree with what I see here, but I'm really impressed with the presentation of it. I really appreciate that you went through each of the departments and explained what they were and what the changes were. I really appreciate that. It helps with clarity. Again, I don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying, but I really appreciate what you presented here.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that anybody wants to ask or comment on? So you're saying that we can break again? Okay.
Yes, and yeah.
So,
I think they anticipated more questions.
It's okay.
well, they might have, but so, does everybody want a half hour, 45 minutes?
Half hour.
Half hour? Half hour is good. And I'd like to suggest, I don't suggest, we're going to meet at the Christmas tree for our picture before anybody leaves anywhere. So it's just for social media purposes. And where'd Sarah go?
She's thinking.
But,
Yeah.
okay, so we'll, before you leave to go for lunch or whatever you're doing, not administration, that's fine. You can get your own, you can get a picture with us later if you like. Councilor McCoy.
Two things. One, I was hoping that my photo wouldn't be in perpetuity with the cast and crutches. So I was wondering if we could delay the picture taking